most people would agree that the human brain is a key component to business success. Yet, few people would say the same thing about their body. But the fact is, the brain and the body are intimately connected, and they work together to help us perform at our best. So what if I told you there was a simple solution to the mental, physical, and organizational health issues that we currently face? Things like poor productivity, negative work stress, employee disengagement, absenteeism, presenteeism, and even rising healthcare costs. Even better, what if I told you that this solution didn't require expensive technology, advanced education, any massive cost outlays, and it might even lower our taxes? The best part is that every human already has the built-in capability to do it, starting now. Now, you probably think I'm nuts, or at least blissfully ignorant, but in my 30-plus year career as a performance coach and consultant, I've seen the power of this transformation in people, families, and businesses, and it never fails to blow my mind with how simple and effective it is. So what is this futuristic miracle cure? Movement. Yes, moving your body. Now, before you break out the straitjacket, let me explain. Movement is literally life. In fact, an important component of defining death is a lack of movement at the cellular level and an absence of neural signals between the brain and the body. So my goal with the session today is to help you see movement from a new perspective, to highlight the simple, highly effective strategies that will help you thrive. And lastly, I want to inspire you to implement these strategies in your personal and professional lives. It's an undeniable fact that the human body evolved to move, yet today we're more sedentary than ever. And as a species, I believe we've reached a critical point in our evolution, and it's having a profound impact on every aspect of our health, our work, and our communities. At the heart of the issue is the fact that technology and our modern lifestyle have changed faster than human physiology. And this widening gap is literally killing us. So to better frame our current situation, let's have a look back at our evolutionary past. For as long as humans have been on the planet, our survival has depended on us being able to move. Whether it was hunting, gathering, fishing, fighting, fleeing, or maybe some other activity, movement was critical. Even in more recent history, physical labor was our primary source of activity. Because of this, the human body has evolved to optimize brain function, hormone levels, and ultimately our survival around movement and activity. Yet it's only been the past 60 to 70 years that we've been sedentary as a society. This trend has accelerated dramatically in the past 30 years. And these days, we move less than at any other time in history. In fact, movement has gone from a literal survival skill to a lifestyle choice. Unfortunately, our physiology hasn't made the shift, and it's creating havoc for our health and performance. Thanks to medical advancements, we're living longer, but most humans are unhealthy, less physically capable, and despite a higher economic standing, they're less fulfilled with life. One of the silver linings of the pandemic we've been experiencing is that it's shone an even brighter spotlight on how important movement is to our health, our happiness, and our life. Now, even before the pandemic, we weren't very active. Less than 20% of people were active enough to experience even basic health benefits. But since the pandemic began, global activity levels have plummeted even further. We've had increased anxiety, depression, and serious health risks because of it. But the great news is, despite what many people are feeling right now and what we see in the news, there's hope. Because we're in direct control of our daily actions. Unfortunately, while daily movement improves almost every aspect of our life, most of modern society is designed to set us up for failure in these areas. We just have to look around at us and at the grim stats to see that what we're doing is failing us. Across the developed world, 2 out of every 3 people are either overweight or obese. And now more people are obese than are overweight. Now, I joined the fitness industry over 30 years ago to help people live a healthier, more fit life. But in that time, the obesity rate has tripled. I'm trying not to take it personally, but it's solidified my desire to make a bigger difference in the world. And this is where people, companies, and governments, when we come together, have the power to transform our future. So this solution goes far beyond the fitness industry. But how do we fix it? What changes can we make? Since everything begins with a single person turning their thoughts into action, let's start our discussion at the individual level. Lao Tzu famously said that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So let's make sure this step is in the right direction. And a smart first step often involves that learning journey, gaining perspective on where we're going. And to help my clients better understand movement and to strategically incorporate it into their life, I created a simple model that I call the movement spectrum. And this movement spectrum is also the foundation for how businesses, communities, and governments can strategically harness the power of movement. So the 5 components of the movement spectrum are movement, activity, exercise, fitness, and performance. The great news is that the first 3 are the most important. The other 2, fitness and performance, those are completely optional. As the name suggests, it all starts with phase 1, movement. So what is movement? Well, I define it as actively taking every joint in your body through its full range of motion. And ideally, we do this a few times a day, or well, as many times a day as we can. Sometimes I use the word mobility as an interchangeable word with movement, and that's okay. Mobility, movement, doesn't matter. Now, I can already hear you saying, well, this is daunting. I've got enough in my day. I can't add more mobility and movement in already. Don't worry. It only takes a few seconds to do. Let me show you. What we're going to do, reach up high, take a deep breath, squat down, exhale, come up, rotate to one side, come down, exhale again, rotate to the other side. Now, just doing that, we've taken almost every joint in our body through a fairly large range of motion. My thing is, I bet a lot of you had trouble doing it. Could you actually get through the full range of motion? Did you have aches, pains, cracks, and creaks? I'm sure my back was like, oh, I've been sitting in a car for a while, and I was feeling it. And this speaks to why movement is so important. While there are almost endless benefits, at the most basic level, adding movement to your daily life is an amazing boost to cognition, creativity, your focus, your productivity, injury prevention, and so much more. But remember when I said that the human body was built to move? It's totally true. But the axiom, use it or lose it, also applies. When we don't move, we begin to lose function. And we see this at the end of every workday or after a long car ride like I just did. People are tight, restricted, and riddled with aches and pains. And this is just from a single day. When we add decades of neglect together, we end up with a society rife with aches, pains, injury, and disease. But we already know that because we're there right now. That's what society's facing. If we look back at our cave people ancestors, limited mobility was a serious liability to survival. Simple daily movement like the squat we just did was necessary for gathering food, making clothing, or building a fire. And there are 360 joints in adult humans. And every single one of them is involved with helping us move through life. Yet very few people actually use these joints properly. That's why one of the first homework assignments I give clients is to do what I call a mobility minute. It's approximately 1 minute where you actively take all the joints in your body through their full range of motion. Just start at your head, work down to your feet, spend a few seconds at each major area. To help build that habit and lower the barrier of entry, my suggestion is do 1 minute in the morning as soon as your feet hit the floor. Then do another minute as the last thing you do before you crawl into bed at night. Now, if those are the only 2 minutes of movement and mobility you get in during the day, then you're still ahead of 99% of people in the world, because most people don't move their joints through that full range of motion. And it's just a bonus if you can add another session or two throughout the day. And I've used the 1 minute number because it's just a nice round number. But 10 seconds is better than nothing. In fact, shorter, more frequent sessions are extremely beneficial. I like to call the mobility minute the pre-flight checklist for your body, because it allows you to easily identify any areas that might need more focus and attention. Maybe it's your neck or your shoulder or your hips. But this is the exact opposite of what most people do. If something's painful or tight, maybe it's just uncomfortable, they just avoid doing it or avoid using that area, and they just go on with life and hope it goes away. We've talked a lot about movement up to this point because it's the first and the most important step in the movement spectrum. But it's also the most commonly neglected. Once we're consistently moving and mobilizing our body, it prepares us to better experience life. And every other phase of the movement spectrum becomes easier and less painful. So how can we have mobility and movement show up in our day? I already explained. Mobility minute in the morning, mobility minute in the evening, and then maybe a few 10 to 20 second targeted sessions, ideally each hour throughout the day. But even if you get a few in throughout the day, it's going to make a huge difference. You'll notice how much better you feel and how much better you function each day. And as I said, it sets the stage for the next phase in the movement spectrum, and that's activity. So activity is simply known as activities of daily living, or ADLs. This includes things like getting out of bed or brushing your teeth, walking around your house, maybe taking a leisurely stroll around the neighborhood, or doing some manual labor. Now, our ancestors had to walk for hours, whether it was hunting or harvesting food, but now we just open up an app and Instacart or skip the dishes, and food magically shows up. The pandemic has changed this dramatically too. Across most of society, activity levels have been decimated. And it's no wonder people are facing so many mental and physical challenges. Our goal with this phase is simple. Do more activity. Get up, move around, take more steps. Now, you might be already familiar with this concept because it's where the 10,000 step guideline came from. And I can tell you from personal experience, over the last year and a half, my personal step count dropped from around 8,500 down to 1,500. And I had to consciously find more ways to get activity during the day, working from home, not doing the normal things that we did for activity. And this is important because when we're more active, it improves our blood flow, our mood, reduces blood pressure, reduces stress, boosts brain function. We actually get smarter when we move. Now, there are plenty of simple ways that you can add activity throughout your day. Things like taking the stairs instead of the elevator, walking up the escalator instead of standing on it and staring at your phone. Maybe go for a morning or evening walk, or ideally both. If you go shopping, park further from the store and walk to the store. Now, I can see you rolling your eyes. And you're probably thinking, yeah, I've heard this before. Of course you have. I know you understand the concept. The key to success is to actually do these things on a consistent basis. Most people don't. So here are 2 simple steps to help you build a solid movement and activity habit. Step 1 is to shift your mindset around movement and activity by embracing the fact that these small daily actions add up to huge long-term improvements. Now, step 2 is to put your new mindset into action. And the question you have to ask yourself is, are you willing to shift your mindset and decide that you're an active person? next phase of the movement spectrum, exercise. Now, I can already hear the groans. Bear with me. I'm not saying you need to hit the gym for an intense workout. Exercise is simply activity done above a baseline of intensity. And the even better news is that your baseline is yours alone. It's not mine. If you're a couch potato, then that baseline's pretty low, and most things are going to count as exercise. If you're an Olympian, well, that baseline's going to be a lot higher. And the great thing is, it doesn't even matter what type of activity you do. The goal here is to elevate your heart rate and ideally get a bit of a sweat going, at least a few times a week. If you normally walk, do some of your walks at a pace that's fast enough to get you breathing heavier. If you take the stairs at the office, do a few more flights or take them faster. At the most basic level, anything that you do above baseline is beneficial. For optimal results, we recommend about 150 minutes of what's called moderate to vigorous physical activity every week. If that sounds like a lot, it's actually less than 22 minutes each day. And for our ancestors, our evolutionary ancestors, general activity was a huge part of each day. But within that general activity, there were numerous bouts of more intense exercise, such as lifting heavy objects or maybe climbing a hill or a tree. Now, you're already on your edge of your seat, I can tell. But here's where things get really interesting. Remember when I mentioned that the first three phases of the movement spectrum were the most important? It's true. And this is because 80% or more of the health benefits that we'll see come from these first three phases. Things like more energy, better focus, better mood, improved sleep. You can dramatically lower the risk of heart disease, obesity, stroke, and all these other serious illnesses. You can reduce the need for medications. We can lower our healthcare costs. We have more creativity and pretty much improve performance in every area of life. Notice how I haven't said anything about going to the gym or working out. Contrary to what you've been led to believe, you can live an amazingly happy, healthy, fit life without ever stepping foot inside a gym or doing a traditional gym workout. And I'm saying this as someone who owns several gyms. Now, this isn't to say that the last two phases of the movement spectrum aren't beneficial. It's just that fitness and performance are optional. It all depends on your goals. Fitness is simply exercise done with a specific purpose in mind. For example, you may choose to add more emphasis on muscle building, strength, improving cardiovascular performance, or maybe your power output. The key to fitness is that you target and track these measures with aspects of your fitness sessions. Performance is simply fitness done in a competitive environment, usually against time or an opponent. Now, there's often a much higher level of intensity in these last two phases, and for our ancient ancestors, this wouldn't have been a big deal. It might have involved hunting, fighting, or fleeing, and while it was critical for survival then, you don't need them for basic health and well-being. These days, fitness and performance are great for a personal challenge, maybe if you compete in a sport, or if you have a demanding job that requires higher levels of physical function. The challenge that we're seeing today comes when people skip the first few phases and jump right into fitness and performance. And today we see it all the time. I call it weekend warrior syndrome. It's a key reason why physiotherapists are so busy. Our ancient ancestors didn't have this problem because their day was packed with movement and exercise. So fitness and performance were a much easier progression. Today, when people who are sedentary or out of shape and unhealthy decide to get fit and lose weight, they often hit the gym with some intense fitness or performance workouts. But since they haven't built that foundation of movement, activity, or exercise, a butt-kicking gym workout will actually create more issues like frustration, injury, and a failure mentality. But sadly, much of society is set up to perpetuate this negative cycle. So to put the entire movement spectrum into perspective, let's use a short example of walking and jogging. Wrap your mind around this little scenario. After consistently doing a mobility minute in the morning and evening, you start beginning to feel a little more coordinated, maybe less achy than you can remember. This inspires you to add a short walk and stretch between meetings to get some fresh air. You quickly notice, hey, you know what? This is dialing in my focus. I'm feeling more productive. So to transition from work, you start to include a 20-minute power walk and jog with maybe a couple simple strength exercises thrown in as a bit of a circuit. You're finding that this boosts your energy and mood for the evening. After a few months of consistency, you're like, wow, I feel amazing. And you have more energy than you ever thought possible. And you've lost almost 15 pounds. Now, because you've enjoyed jogging so far, and you start to decide, I'm going to focus more on improving my cardiovascular output. So for a couple of your runs during the week, you increase the pace a bit, and you buy a heart rate monitor so you can start tracking your heart rate, and your goal is to spend 20 to 30 minutes in your anaerobic threshold zone, which is zone 3. It's a little more specific, a little more focused. After a few months of that, you've improved your running performance more significantly. You start seeing even more health improvements. And you're like, I'm going to add an extra challenge, some more excitement into this. So you decide to enter a 5K race. Now, this is just a simple example of how the movement spectrum can be utilized, but it also applies to all kinds of other areas, such as strength, endurance, power. It is important to keep in mind that the movement spectrum is progressive. Skipping steps is a recipe for injury, failure, and frustration. And that's because those first 3 phases, movement, activity, and exercise, they form the health foundation that allows us to do all the other cool sports and adventures that we want to do. When we reframe our daily life through the movement spectrum, we can start to see and harness opportunities every hour of every day that will improve our health, our happiness, and our performance. Now, I spent so much time on the individual aspect of the movement spectrum because at the most basic level, everybody is responsible for moving their own body. However, I believe the role of companies, communities, and governments is to help facilitate that process and smooth the path to consistent action. Let's have a little closer look and see how this can happen. At the corporate level, it's no secret that healthy, happy, engaged employees, they perform better, they contribute more to the organization, and they have lower healthcare costs. On the flip side, unhealthy, stressed, disengaged employees are unproductive, and they cost billions of dollars every year to their organizations and communities. Yet, despite these clear facts, most companies and work environments make the situation worse. Work is one of the top sources of debilitating stress. And according to Gallup, 64% of workers are disengaged. 13% of those are actively disengaged, which means they're purposely sabotaging coworkers in the organization. It's crystal clear that change is needed. And at the heart of organizational change, I believe, is the reframing of leadership mindsets and corporate culture. Leaders, they have to embrace the fact that healthy people lead to healthy business. But then they actually have to create the change that's needed to improve employee performance. I believe the first step in this change is to shift role responsibilities at the C-level to include employee health. And this could involve adding responsibilities to a current executive or maybe creating a new role, such as Chief Wellness Officer. But these days, a C-level executive that has measurable KPIs around employee health, well-being, and happiness, well, that's about as common as a 2-headed unicorn. And you don't see those every day. Now, we could talk about all kinds of great programs to implement, but without C-level accountability for employee wellness, we're going to continually be fighting an uphill battle. Thankfully, until this happens at the executive level, there are still ways that we can create change. A great place to start is for leaders to begin educating their teams on how to harness the movement spectrum. Of course, this is going to require a shift in corporate culture so employees actually have permission to start moving throughout the workday, and they aren't required to be chained to a desk or device. And we see far too much of that in the corporate world. Leaders can also provide a framework to help employees implement these new habits. Here are some great examples. Leaders can encourage standing and stretching during long meetings. Maybe they start running 25 or 50-minute meetings to allow for regular movement and activity breaks throughout the day. But most importantly, we need to have senior leadership model these changes and speak to them each day. Notice how none of these changes cost money? See, wellness is not a budget issue. It's a mindset and behavioral shift. Of course, some changes and programs are going to cost money, but that's money well invested. Properly implemented strategies, they show an amazing financial return, usually somewhere in the ballpark of 300 to 800%. At the government and communities level, investing in health and well-being of citizens makes even more sense. 5 of the 6 leading causes of death are what we call lifestyle diseases. That means they're largely preventable through small changes in lifestyle behaviors and daily habits, things like the movement spectrum. Heart disease and cancer are the top 2 causes of death, and they make up over 50% of all deaths. When we talk about low-hanging fruit for change, it doesn't get any more obvious than this, and both of them are positively influenced by using the movement spectrum. Yet our healthcare system is structured around treating illness rather than promoting wellness. So making a commitment at all levels of government to promote the movement spectrum is a simple act that will dramatically reshape our communities and the health of our citizens. And the great news is some of these changes are already happening. We have community building and revitalization efforts centered around less driving and more outdoor recreation and leisure activities. Awesome. We can also improve more targeted and engaging education campaigns that actually inspire people to change and that don't read like a typical government pamphlet. More importantly, we have to make this change process positive, uplifting, and supportive. We know that berating people for their health or their body composition just makes things worse. Shaming doesn't create the change that we want to see. On the flip side, dismissing the gravity of our situation and normalizing serious health and societal issues, that's not helpful either. So what can we do? Well, 3 components must exist for change to be successful. First, people must have a clear and compelling vision of a more positive future for themselves. They have to have a simple and easy to follow plan. And finally, they have to believe that by following that plan over time, that they can be successful. I see the role of companies, communities, and governments as facilitators to help with each of these steps and support individuals throughout their journey. Now, as individuals, it's up to us to continue learning and developing. By embracing a growth mindset, we can continue to improve the areas of our lives that matter to us most. And using the movement spectrum to improve our personal health and happiness is one of the best ways to ensure that every other area of our life improves. Because being sick, tired, and unhealthy, it's like driving with the emergency brake on. It's a lot of extra work for not a lot of progress. We've discussed a lot already. So here's a quick summary of positive steps you can take to get started. The first step is to review the movement spectrum and start plugging it into your day. Begin with the mobility minute each morning and each evening. Increase your activity level, even if it's just a few more steps each day. Aim to sweat a few times a week. And it doesn't matter what you do, just do it above your baseline. If you've been doing all these consistently for several months, yeah, you can add some fitness and performance. At the corporate level, find out who's responsible for employee health and well-being at your company. Encourage your leaders to adopt some of the healthy workplace habits we've discussed. And support community organizations and community leaders who promote more outdoor activity and wellness education. While these changes may be simple in concept, look, I'm not naive enough to think that they're going to be easy. We're working against decades of ingrained habits, outdated policies, and misinformation. However, my experience as a personal performance expert and as a parent of 2 young kids has shown me that having a vision for the change you want to make and putting small daily habits into action can add up to tremendous results over time. When we all work together, we can accelerate that change. So please remember, movement is life. Now, if the first summary wasn't enough, here's a quicker recipe for success. Learn to move well first, then move often, and of course, make it fun. The ball's in your court. I'm excited to see what you do with it. Now, if you want to get started and could benefit from a little assistance, please reach out. I would love to connect.